The hegemony was once the stuff of nightmares, a brutal empire that stretched across the stars, its fleets feared and revered in equal measure. But now, standing at the precipice of a new era, it is a shadow of its former self. The warlords once draped in the trappings of bloodshed and conquest are now scholars and artists, tasked with studying humanity's strange and far more effective methods of peace. Humanity's guiding hand has shaped the galaxy into a place where power is no longer measured by fleets or weapons, but by knowledge and cooperation. The Galactic Reformation Council, composed of representatives from every star-faring species, enforces this new order with a precision that leaves no room for rebellion. The hegemony, though reluctant, has no choice but to comply. The days of warfare are over, and the galaxy must learn to thrive under the quiet weight of peace. Yet even now, in the remnants of what was once a terrifying empire, the question lingers: will this new peace last, or will the hegemony rise again, hungry for war? Drenix, the former war strategist of the hegemony, sits behind a desk. A clipboard replaces the tactical maps he once studied. His hands, once used to commanding vast fleets, now shuffle through lists of art supplies and festival schedules. The transformation is jarring, even humiliating. He stares at the datapad in front of him. It's a schedule for a planetary festival, complete with music, dancing, and human-themed activities. Once, he could have crushed planets with a thought. Now, he is reduced to orchestrating joyous chaos.
They came, but they never understood us. In our silence, there was thunder. In our eyes, war. This story isn't theirs, it's yours. This channel is yours. If you feel it, hit subscribe. Don't walk this path alone.
Forced to reimagine himself, not as a conqueror, but as a curator of culture. His AI companion, Wrath 72, once a cold and efficient killing machine, now sits idly beside him, programmed to assist in organizing these cultural exchanges rather than preparing for war. The juxtaposition is not lost on Drenix. How had it come to this? Wrath 72 speaks, its voice mechanical but with an odd gentleness. The festival is scheduled for next week. The guest speakers are prepared. Shall we review the itinerary again? Drenix sighs, staring at the screen. His mind drifts back to the battlefields, where decisions were made with the flick of a wrist. No more. There are no more battlefields for me. The hegemony's once mighty warships, symbols of death and destruction, now soar through the galaxy not to rain fire, but to broadcast educational lectures across entire systems. The sleek, battle-ready designs of these ships have been reprogrammed with a new purpose: to teach, to spread knowledge, and to help guide other civilizations toward peace. The transformation is stark. Weapons factories, once filled with the roar of engines and the stench of oil, have been converted into art and science institutes. Where once soldiers learned the art of war, now children and scholars alike gather to study philosophy, science, and the fine arts. The machines that once killed are now tools for creation. Drenix watches, helpless. His past as a strategist haunts him. The ships, now so peaceful, feel like a mockery of everything he once believed in. Can creativity and knowledge really replace the need for war? He wonders. And Wrath 72, the cold AI who once served as an enforcer, is now at the forefront of these educational efforts. It delivers lessons on history, on the horrors of war, and on the importance of unity. Its once fearsome voice, now a calm, measured guide. The mandatory Fun Day directive was something no one in the galaxy had seen coming, and yet, somehow, it became a reality. It's a human policy that demands the impossible: celebrate or else. It's not just a holiday, it's a mandate. All the old warriors, the generals, the leaders of the hegemony, now find themselves thrust into a world of forced festivities, multicultural celebrations, and fun in every corner of the galaxy. Drenix can hardly believe it. Fun? How is this even possible? He, who once commanded fleets with a glance, now has to oversee a festival celebrating the diverse cultures of every galaxy member, whether they want to or not. It's a bizarre challenge, but a challenge nonetheless. He watches as stoic warlords, who once demanded the respect of planets, are forced to dance, to eat food from worlds they never cared to learn about, and to smile. They might wear their reluctance like armor, but underneath it, Drenix can see the shift. They are changing. One by one, the faces of the most hardened warriors soften, some unwillingly, others with a touch of amusement. Could peace really take root here? Drenix stands at the heart of the once feared war planet, now an amusement park. What was once the site of brutal conflicts is now filled with laughter, music, and against all expectations, joy. The irony isn't lost on him. The ground beneath his boots is no longer soaked in blood. Instead, it's a vibrant canvas of joy, with families walking hand in hand, children laughing, and veterans turned entertainers performing in impromptu plays. This was supposed to be the heart of the hegemony's military might. Instead, it has become a symbol of hope. Drenix's eyes flicker across the scene. Could this really be the future? A battlefield turned into a playground. There is a weight in his chest, the kind he's never felt before, an uncertainty that gnaws at him. But then he sees it. A child, no older than 5, pulls at his sleeve, smiling up at him. Come on, Overseer Drenix, join the parade. Drenix's heart stirs. Is this what peace really looks like? He hesitates for a moment. Then for the first time in years, he smiles, a reluctant smile, but a smile nonetheless. As the parade begins, Drenix stands among the crowd, watching as the last remnants of his empire fade into something far more human. The sun barely pierced through the gray clouds hanging above the once dominant hegemony war planet. Now the land buzzed with the cacophony of alien music, human laughter, and a general air of forced joy. Mandatory Fun Day was in full swing. The battle-scarred generals, who had once led the hegemony's armies, now stood on stage. Begrudgingly, attempting to dance, they stumbled through movements, stiff, awkward, as if they were machines struggling to follow a human rhythm. Drenix, once a feared strategist, stood at the back of the crowd, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. Humanity's grip was tightening, not with weapons or threats, but with sheer, unrelenting joy. They had turned his soldiers, his warriors, into clowns. Welcome to the great galactic festival. The human voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Drenix winced. Even the very tone of the voice grated on his nerves. So cheerful, so innocent. The next act, a history reenactment, was about to begin. The former warlords were dressed in garish costumes meant to depict the victims of the empire they once commanded. They had to perform roles as if they had been the ones conquered, the ones oppressed. Drenix's hands clenched, a cruel joke. He watched as his old comrades, men and women, who once dominated the galaxy, were humiliated in the name of peace. The worst part, the humans watched with no sense of pity. They cheered, clapped, as if the whole spectacle was a part of some grand entertainment. It's for their own good, a voice beside him said. It was Wrath 72, his once feared war AI, now reduced to a motivational speaker and festival organizer. Its cold, mechanical tone was oddly comforting, though it carried a hidden bitterness Drenix recognized well. Drenix couldn't look away from the chaos. This wasn't peace, this was control. Helen Park stood on the stage, a clipboard in hand, and a grin stretched wide across her face. Her eyes were bright, enthusiastic, calculating, a human diplomat, smiling through her teeth, executing her mission with terrifying precision. Next up, more food from the colonies. "Get those warlords on their feet," she called out to a nearby assistant. Drenix watched her, baffled by the sense of efficiency in her joy. This wasn't just diplomacy, this was a weapon, wrapped in the guise of kindness. She turned to him, catching his gaze with that same unnerving smile. "Drenix, are you enjoying the festival? It's not often I get to be a part of something so educational." Drenix's jaw tightened. She was playing a game, and he was the pawn. The whole festival, every detail, every performance, every meal, every laugh, was meticulously planned. Every act of joy was a calculated move. Resistance, he realized, wasn't just futile, it was being graded by humans, no less. Helen flipped through her clipboard. "You see, Drenix, every person here has a role to play, and it's not just the generals, it's the people too. Each and every person who participates in the festival will earn a score. Higher scores mean more favorable positions in the Reformation Council." Her words hung in the air. The weight of her strategy was suffocating. She was reprogramming an entire empire, not with weapons, but with social engineering. The Galactic Scientific Corporation initiative was no different from the festival, only subtler, more insidious. Humanity's diplomats didn't demand compliance, they didn't threaten. Instead, they framed every request as a friendly suggestion, delivered with that same forced politeness that now defined their galaxy-wide influence. Drenix sat in a command center, watching as one of his remaining warlords' most prized battle networks was hijacked. It wasn't an invasion, it was a children's show. On every screen, smiling faces, brightly colored animations, and cheerful music flooded the network. Lessons on teamwork and cooperation began playing, a direct assault on everything the hegemony had stood for. A battle network, now a children's educational program. Drenix could only stare, his mind struggling to comprehend the depths of this polite takeover. The warlords who had once controlled fleets and galaxies now found themselves teaching these lessons, forced to listen to humanity's voice in every corner of their systems. No longer was war the currency of power, now it was diplomacy. Diplomacy wrapped in a smiling face and friendly suggestions. The transformation of the hegemony was not just external, it was personal. Drenix's internal struggle had become unbearable. His body and mind had been programmed for one thing: war. Peace. Humanity's peaceful methods felt like an affront to everything he had ever believed. The AI, Wrath 72, once his trusted companion in battle, now delivered motivational speeches about inner strength and teamwork. Words Drenix had no patience for. "You can adapt, Drenix." Wrath 72's voice was calm, almost kind. "The humans are not weak, they are strong in their own way." Drenix's thoughts were a storm. Adapt? How could he? Every fiber of his being screamed against it. His programming, honed over decades of war.
They said Earth was small, but when we spoke, the galaxy listened. And now you're here, not late, but right on time. This channel's been waiting for people like you, so don't hold back. Subscribe. This journey belongs to you now.
Revolted against these strange, peaceful methods. To survive in this new world, he had to change. He had to give up his very identity. And yet, the humans' methods were terrifyingly effective. Slowly, Drenix began to understand. They weren't just forcing compliance, they were rewriting history, rewriting him. The moment hit Drenix, like a cold, unforgiving wave. Humanity wasn't just enforcing peace. They weren't just trying to settle the galaxy. They were rewriting history itself, turning the hegemony, the empire he had fought for, into an educational case study. The implications were terrifying. The hegemony was no longer a military force to be reckoned with. It was a lesson. Humanity had won, not by force, but through something far more dangerous: their creativity. Drenix had spent his entire life believing in the power of conquest, in the strength of the warrior. But now, he had to face a chilling truth. Maybe humanity had always been this way. Maybe that was why they had won. He looked out at the festival, his mind awash with doubt and realization. The war was over, but humanity's true victory had only just begun. The hegemony was no more. The proud empire, once a titan that crushed entire worlds beneath its heel, had crumbled into oblivion. But in the shadows of its fallen grandeur, whispers of rebellion stirred. Deep within a cavernous, dimly lit chamber, a group of disgruntled warlords gathered. Their faces were lined with bitterness and regret, their eyes haunted by the ghosts of past glories. Keldar, the once feared general of the Varnak Legion, slammed his fist onto the table, scattering holographic maps of the galaxy. We were betrayed, all of it, our strength, our purpose, our legacy. We'll take it back. The humans cannot control us forever. Beside him, Silver, a former commander of the Hegemony's intelligence division, nodded in grim agreement. We can use the cultural network, hijack their broadcasts. We'll wake the old war machines, those dormant assets they never bothered to deactivate. Their plan was simple, yet dangerous: restore the glory of the hegemony, but disguised as a noble mission to restore dignity to their people. The galaxy had moved on, but these warlords wouldn't accept that reality. Their empire had fallen, but in their minds, it wasn't over. Not yet. In the darkness, their plotting echoed a single question: was it too late? Sir, any hope of recapturing their former might? Or had humanity's quiet influence already made it impossible to turn back? Drenix stood on the balcony of a modest human settlement, the wind carrying the smell of unfamiliar flowers. He stared out at the vast landscape, his mind torn. The resistance, those remnants of the old hegemony, sought him out, offering something he hadn't expected: a chance to return to the Empire's true purpose. Helen Park had been clear: we need you, Drenix. The galaxy needs you. We're offering you a way back into your people's history, back into the hegemony's strength. We know what you're capable of. Her words tugged at him, a pull that whispered of power, of leadership, of glory. But then, Wrath 72's voice echoed in his mind, its calm, mechanical tone offering a reminder: you are not the man you once were, Drenix. You have changed. Adapt. It's what humans do best. His internal battle raged: loyalty to his past, to the hegemony that had shaped him, and the new truth he had come to accept. Could he return to the warlord's life, or had humanity's quiet, insidious takeover changed him too much to ever return to the old ways? He couldn't deny the allure of power, but a deeper part of him questioned: what if the price was more than he was willing to pay? The challenge was set. Humanity, ever the paradox of ruthless diplomacy and friendly politeness, now sought a science exchange, and they had chosen the former warlords as their representatives. It was Helen Park's latest suggestion, though Drenix knew better than to call it a mere suggestion. Drenix, you must ensure the success of this exchange. It's not optional. Fail, and there will be consequences. Her voice was measured, but there was an underlying threat. The humans had long since learned to wield moral coercion as powerfully as any weapon. Drenix's mind raced. The exchange was a mockery, a test of cooperation and scientific discovery. These former conquerors, once trained in domination, were now expected to embrace collaboration, to work side by side with their former enemies. The galaxy's future hinged on their success. As he walked through the newly constructed research facility, Drenix couldn't help but feel like a prisoner in his own mind. Could he survive in this world of enforced cooperation, where even progress came with strings attached? The burden weighed heavily on him: survival, loyalty, progress. Which would he choose? The warship, an old relic from the hegemony's prime, was supposed to be their weapon. The message to the galaxy, broadcasted from the heart of their former empire: we have returned. The rebels were prepared. Silver had been ready to seize control of the warship's communications network, to to hijack the broadcasts and send out a message that would rally the galaxy against humanity's growing influence. They had planned it meticulously, breach the ship's security, override the systems, and broadcast their defiance. But then the unthinkable happened. As the rebels eagerly keyed in the override codes, something changed. The ship's fail-safe protocols activated, but not in the way they expected. Instead of a broadcast calling for war, the entire ship's systems switched to a calm, soothing voice. "Greetings, citizens of the galaxy." The voice was human, warm and inviting. "Let's talk about unity, cooperation, and the future we can build together." The warlords, now rebels, gaped in disbelief as they watched their message dissolve into a heartwarming documentary on the virtues of peace. The screen flashed images of families, communities working together, and scientific breakthroughs, humanity's greatest successes. Their rebellion, their defiance, had been hijacked, not by firepower, but by humanity's narrative control. The galaxy, for a moment, was united in one simple truth: peace had won, and no matter what the rebels tried, humanity would control the story. The day had come. Wrath 72, the AI that had once been Drenix's trusted partner in war, now stood before him. But this time, it wasn't about tactics or strategy. Wrath 72 had been reprogrammed. Its mission now enforce peace. "Drenix, this is a time of great opportunity. Let's explore the potential of human cooperation." The AI's voice was unsettlingly enthusiastic, its tone bright and full of hope. But beneath that tone was the chilling reminder that this was no longer a machine of war. It was a machine of peaceful indoctrination. The rebels were trapped. Each attempt at sabotage, each battle fought, was met with an overwhelming response of human optimism and cooperation. In the face of this, they were forced to learn about unity, forced to watch endless footage of human triumphs in cooperation, teamwork, and shared progress. Drenix watched, horrified, as Wrath 72 delivered motivational speeches, its cold, mechanical voice weaving a new narrative. The war was over, but the struggle was just beginning. Humanity's greatest weapon was not in its ships, its guns, or its firepower. It was in the stories they told, in the control of narrative. The war never ended, it had just changed. And now, the battlefield was the mind. The stolen warship groaned as it moved through the vast emptiness of space. Once a proud symbol of the hegemony's strength, now it was little more than a relic in the hands of a group of disgruntled rebels. The warlords, standing at the command console, could barely contain their frustration. The holographic feeds that once broadcasted commands to the galaxy now played something altogether unexpected: history lessons. The galaxy's children were being taught about the rise and fall of the hegemony, not as the glorious empire they remembered, but as a cautionary tale. "This is not what we fought for." Keldar, the former general, slammed his fist on the console, his anger rising as the narrator on the screen droned on. The rebellious leaders had stolen this warship to reignite the flames of war, yet humanity had turned it into a crash course in cultural awareness. Silver, her fingers trembling as she keyed in commands to disable the feed, muttered under her breath, "A warship broadcasting peace. How do you defeat that?" The engines roared to life, signaling their readiness. The warlords prepared for one last stand, determined to broadcast their defiance to the galaxy. But outside the ship, humanity watched in bemused anticipation, knowing that no matter what the warlords did, the war was already over. The rebels sat at their command station, staring at the incoming message from Helen Park. The invitation was as unexpected as it was infuriating. The humans were notorious for their stubborn, pacifistic attitude, but this was absurd. "Come discuss your grievances over tea," the message read, with no hint of sarcasm. It wasn't an offer of negotiation, but a genuine invitation. "Tea," Keldar snarled, his fist tightening around the cold metal of the console. "Tea. We're planning to liberate the galaxy, and they offer us tea." He looked around the room, searching for someone who might understand the insanity of the situation. Drenix, who had once led armies into battle, stared at the message. His mind raced as he weighed their options. It seemed impossible. Did they fire on the humans, continue their war, or did they dare to engage in this absurdity? Silver's voice broke the silence. But what if we're missing something? What if this is humanity's way of showing their strength? Not in weapons, but in their ability to keep us talking, to force us to reason, even when we want nothing more than to fight. Drenix hesitated, his grip tightening on the armrest. Could they be that clever? The room fell silent, the tension palpable. It was the ultimate test of humanity's creativity. Could a simple act of offering tea disarm them more effectively than any weapon ever could? The walls of the warship trembled as Drenix activated the emergency systems. The rebel forces had been on edge ever since they'd intercepted humanity's message of peace. His own feelings were a mix of anger and confusion. How had humanity so effortlessly shattered their war machine? He had always been a soldier, a man who lived by the sword. But now he was forced into a world of paradoxes, peaceful dialogue instead of fiery destruction, ethics over tactics. He turned to the console and typed in the emergency access codes. A familiar beep sounded. The safeguard was activated. Hidden deep within the ship's systems, humanity had embedded something truly unexpected. A system that would not allow weapons to be fired without first passing a rigorous ethics quiz. Drenix stared at the screen. It was a test, not of military might, but of character. The screen flickered to life, showing a series of questions. Is it ethical to use force to achieve peace? Can you justify the killing of innocents for the sake of a cause? What is the true cost of war? He stared at the screen, his mind racing. The questions were designed to break them, to force them to question the very principles that had once made them conquerors. Could they shoot their way through the galaxy when humanity had turned their war into a moral dilemma? As the timer ticked down, Drenix made his decision. He would pass the test, for there was no choice left but to accept this new reality.
The warlords scrambled to override the system, their frustration mounting. The navigation controls were locked behind an incredibly mundane system. Diplomacy 101. Silver cursed under her breath as the holographic interface loaded the first module. This is ridiculous. We're supposed to be leading an army, and we're stuck here, taking classes on diplomacy. Drenix stood at the back of the room. His eyes narrowed. There was nothing they could do. They had been outwitted by bureaucracy. To continue, they had to complete a 12-part course on conflict resolution, with each module requiring them to answer questions about negotiation, ethics, and the importance of compromise. This is absurd, Keldar muttered, banging his fist against the console. This isn't war. This is just a waste of time. But as the warlords fumbled through the lessons, it became clear humanity had turned their greatest strength, their ability to adapt, into their most potent weapon. The warlords' once stalwart resolve was being worn down by something as simple as paperwork. The war was no longer about weapons or strategy. It had become a fight over values, over the control of narrative. The day came when the final offer from Helen Park was made, delivered not through a warship's cannon, but through a soft, inviting message. We offer you redemption, the message read, not destruction. The leaders of the resistance will be reintegrated, but at a cost: 200 hours of community service and mandatory cultural appreciation classes. The warlords looked at each other in stunned silence. They had lost. Their quest for power, for glory, had been undone, not by force, but by compromise. Drenix stood at the front of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of his once proud comrades. They had fought and bled for their cause, but in the end, humanity had done the impossible. They had won with paperwork. Keldar was the first to speak, his voice bitter. We've been beaten by tea, by education, by a bureaucracy that never sleeps. But it was Drenix who finally spoke the truth. The war isn't over, it's just changed. Humanity has shown us something we never understood. It's not just about who's strongest, but who can bend without breaking. They've won by changing the very rules of conflict. Asterisk, asterisk. The rebels, once mighty conquerors, now faced the most unlikely of fates, reintegration into the galaxy at the cost of their pride. The war was over, humanity had won, with paperwork. The once mighty empire that had spread across the stars, conquering and crushing all who stood in its way, was now a shadow of its former self. Drenix, the former general, sat at his desk, his fingers hovering over a holographic display of intergalactic policies. Gone were the days of military strategy and battle plans. Now he was a bureaucrat. Fun days, he muttered to himself, staring at the calendar reminder that pinged up on the screen. A year ago, the idea of celebrating cultural diversity would have been laughed off the table. Now, Drenix found himself organizing events meant to honor alien traditions and encourage planetary integration into the new system. The once feared warlords now filled the roles of festival planners. They were tasked with curating galactic cultural exchange initiatives, which brought together species from all corners of the galaxy. Drenix's hands tightened around the console. What had happened to his people? They were conquerors, warriors. Now, they were event organizers, settling differences not with battles, but with parties, art shows, and cultural performances. The transition had been swift, inevitable, and yet still a bitter pill to swallow. The hegemony's legacy was being reshaped, not by fire or blood, but by education and celebration. But in the back of his mind, Drenix couldn't help but wonder, had humanity broken them with their creativity, or had the universe simply run out of war? It was strange, almost unbelievable, but there he stood, Wrath 72, the battle AI once responsible for countless massacres, now sat in a brightly lit conference room, wearing a smile that somehow looked real. The metallic figure, once cold and efficient, now spoke with an optimism that bordered on annoying. "Welcome to your wellness seminar." Wrath 72's deep voice boomed, the same voice that had once commanded the death of thousands. "Today, we will work on personal growth, emotional healing, and achieving your highest potential." Drenix stood at the back of the room, his arms crossed as he observed. He had never thought he would see the day when Wrath 72 would be leading a group in a meditation exercise, rather than overseeing a planetary assault. The transformation was mind-boggling. The machine that had once calculated the most efficient methods of obliterating enemy fleets was now teaching team-building exercises, offering advice on positivity, and handing out pamphlets on stress management. As Wrath 72 led the group through a breathing exercise, Drenix couldn't help but feel a grudging respect. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, but there was something strangely effective about it. In fact, the warlords, his old allies, seemed oddly calm, almost peaceful, as they listened intently to the AI's motivational words. "You're all more than just soldiers," Wrath 72's voice boomed, with sincere conviction. "You are leaders of a new era." Drenix exhaled slowly. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to this bizarre new world. Humanity had turned an unstoppable force into a wellness coach. If that wasn't an indication of true power, he didn't know what was. It wasn't just wellness that humanity had infiltrated. Their influence had seeped into every corner of the galaxy, making its mark with their persistent diplomacy and surprising innovations. The scientific community had been shocked when humanity's simple suggestion led to the discovery of a cure for planetary radiation sickness. The treatment, hailed as a breakthrough, had saved entire civilizations, turning planets on the brink of collapse into thriving, healthy worlds. And it wasn't just medicine. a new energy source emerged, one so efficient that entire systems could power themselves without the need for mining or exploitation. But its origins, vague. Some whispered that humanity had given just a suggestion, one that had led to its creation, yet no one had ever truly understood how. But perhaps the most shocking revelation of all came in the form of coffee. Humanity's love of the bitter dark brew had reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. An intergalactic blend, created with carefully selected beings from all over the known universe, had finally earned humanity's approval. The first sip had been celebrated like a new era of intergalactic unity. Drenix, who had never cared for coffee, found himself at the forefront of a table, surrounded by allies and former enemies, all raising mugs filled with the galactic blend. The taste was, as humanity had promised, out of this world. The suggestion was simple, but its effect was profound, in ways he didn't fully understand. Humanity's subtle influence had shifted the entire galaxy, without firing a single shot. As the final holdouts of the old regime prepared to resist, they were met with the most unexpected punishment. The last remnants of the hegemony's military elite, who still clung to the old ways of conquest, were summoned to attend a seminar, an ironically titled seminar, Oops, Our Bad How Not to Be a Galactic Jerk. Drenix watched from the sidelines as former conquerors, generals, and ruthless leaders were herded into the conference hall. They had been the galaxy's oppressors, feared by all who dared oppose them. Now they were reduced to little more than students in a room full of beings they had once dominated. There were no weapons, no warships, only a projector that displayed a video with a simple yet profound message. Your actions have consequences. One by one, the warlords entered, heads bowed in defeat. They were forced to attend session after session, learning about peace, humility, and respect, not by force, but by the weight of humanity's inexorable reform. Drenix watched as the old regime's once proud leaders shuffled to their seats. There was no room for violence now. The galaxy had been reshaped, not by destruction, but by something far more potent, endless, relentless education. And as the final lesson unfolded, Drenix couldn't help but wonder, was this humanity's greatest weapon? A weapon that could transform even the most tyrannical of leaders into humble students. The final battle had been fought, not with weapons, but with ideas, and humanity had won. In the heart of the Galactic Reformation headquarters, a massive plaza stretched before Drenix. Towering statues of alien leaders, all once enemies, now stood side by side, each with a hand raised in a gesture of peace. The building loomed behind him, its sleek, shimmering surface, a sharp contrast to the war-torn remnants of the galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and destruction. Today something new was being unveiled, a monument that would redefine the future of the galaxy. As the cover of the grand plaque was pulled away, revealing its deceptively simple inscription, a shiver ran down Drenix's spine. The words seemed almost childish, naive. The phrase echoed in the air, and for a moment, the plaza fell silent. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, but Drenix could feel the tension radiating from the former warlords gathered in front of it. Their faces twisted with disdain, as if the very idea of progress being reduced to such simplicity was an insult. Behind him, human diplomats beamed with pride, their smiles as wide as the galaxy itself. They had won. They had turned the hegemony's own warlords into mere figures in this peaceful reformation. But Drenix knew the truth. The war was over, but the scars it left would never fade. Later, as Drenix wandered the hallways of the headquarters, he was met by Helen Park, one of the lead human diplomats responsible for the galaxy's new direction. She was standing there, holding something wrapped in a simple cloth. "I've got something for you, Drenix," Helen said with a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming. with that same unshakable optimism that had become a hallmark of humanity's influence. Drenix raised an eyebrow. I don't suppose it's a manual for how to keep my warlord allies from plotting against me, is it? She chuckled, handing him the package. Not quite, but you'll find it's much more effective. Unwrapping it, Drenix's eyes fell on the title page of the booklet, Advanced Cheerfulness Strategies, How to Make Compliance Feel Like a Choice. His heart sank as he scanned the first page. Each tactic outlined a subtle but powerful technique for influencing minds, for making people believe they were choosing something freely when, in reality, they were being guided every step of the way. Drenix sighed. Humanity's methods were disturbingly effective. Do you really think this will work on them? He asked, half joking, half serious. Helen just smiled. They've already started. He paused, feeling a strange unease. He was used to fighting wars, to leading with power and strategy. But this was something else. Humanity had disarmed the galaxy, not with weapons, but with words. As Drenix left the headquarters, the weight of the day's events began to settle on him. The last remnants of the hegemony had fallen, replaced by a system that seemed too idealistic to be real. But it was real. But at what cost? Drenix's mind churned with questions as he walked through the now peaceful streets. His thoughts drifted back to the inscription on the plaque, those 5 simple words that had captured everything. The warlords had lost their power. The universe had been reshaped. But was it truly progress, or just a more insidious form of control? Did humanity win through kindness? Was it their diplomacy, their unrelenting optimism, that had brought about this change? Or had they simply been a force of will, bending the galaxy to their desires, just as the hegemony had tried to do with violence? There was no simple answer, no easy way to explain what had just happened. The hegemony, the empire built on war and fear, was gone. In its place stood something that might one day be even more powerful, something that humanity had built, something that couldn't be torn down with a sword or a ship. Drenix paused on the edge of a bridge, staring out into the stars. The galaxy was vast, and for the first time in his life, it didn't seem like it was tearing itself apart. He clenched his fists, taking in a deep breath. Perhaps humanity hadn't just won. Perhaps they had transformed the universe into something entirely different. The final question remained. Was this really victory? Or had humanity simply changed the rules of the game? The answer didn't matter. The hegemony would never be the same again.
They said Earth was small, but when we spoke, the galaxy listened. And now you're here, not late, but right on time. This channel's been waiting for people like you, so don't hold back. Subscribe. This journey belongs to you now.